Hello and welcome to Grammar for Language Teachers. I'm Jo Gakonga. I'm a CELTA trainer, and I know that for many native speakers who want to teach English, a big stumbling block is often learning the grammatical terminology of the language that you can use flawlessly. The first thing to remember really is don't panic. You do know this language implicitly. If you didn't, you wouldn't be able to use it. All that you need to do is to put the terminology to the patterns that you do subconsciously know. And this, I hope, is where I can help. So the course is in its second year now, and many trainees have told me how helpful they've found it. This is an example of the kind of feedback I've had. So sit back, watch this sample video, do the tasks along the way, and I hope you find it useful, and good luck with the rest of your training. So this is part 1 of the course, and this is the second video, Parts of Speech 2. So today we're going to be looking at adverbs. We're going to be looking at adverbs of manner, of frequency, of degree, and of time and place. There are quite a number of different kinds of adverbs. We're also then going to be looking at verbs. We're not going to be looking at verb tenses today. That's in part 4 and 5 of the course. But we're going to be looking at whether verbs are transitive or intransitive, whether they're regular, irregular. We're going to look at the nomenclature of verb parts, what kind of words are associated with different kinds of verb parts. And there'll be quizzes as we go along to help. So without further ado, let's move along and have a good look at adverbs. Now, adverbs are a bit of a ragbag. Unlike verbs, nouns, adjectives, which are fairly distinct entities, adverbs aren't really a one entity. They've got lots of different parts to them. So if you come across a word in a sentence and you're not sure what it is, the chances are not that bad that it's an adverb. So let's start with adverbs of manner. These are, if you like, your classic adverbs. They're the ones that you probably think about if you know anything about this already. So they often end in ly. Now be careful, not every word that ends in ly is an adverb, but most will be. There are a few exceptions. Lovely, for example, is an adjective, but mostly if you see ly on the end of a word, it's going to be an adverb. However, not all adverbs end in ly, as we shall see later. But let's look at these ones to start with. So here's an example. She dances beautifully. So this is a word which describes the verb. The verb is dances, and how does she dance? She dances beautifully. Be careful. Look at this one, for example. She dances well. So well clearly is also an adverb here. It doesn't end in ly. She spins fast. Now fast in this case is an adverb because it describes the verb spins. It could be an adjective. So she's a fast girl, for example. In that case it's an adjective. But here, because it describes the verb, it's an adverb of manner. So I think that something that's helpful here is to think that they answer this question, how does she do something? She does it beautifully, she does it well, she does it fast. Another kind of adverb are adverbs of frequency. Now these are quite different. They answer the question, how often does she do it? They're often taught on a cline, and what we mean by a cline is that we can have words on either end of a spectrum, if you like, and then we have words on the cline in between. So if we have always and never, and learners understand what those words mean, then we could put sometimes in here and they'll have a fairly good idea of what that means because we've taught it on that cline. We could put other words in there, usually, for example. So notice that usually here comes closer to always than sometimes. So you can actually teach the meaning of these words by putting them on a cline like this. Occasionally, for example, is closer to never than it is to sometimes. It means almost never, doesn't it, occasionally? So all of these words are adverbs of frequency. They answer the question, how often? Now, in terms of the form of these, there are some grammatical rules to think about whereabouts in the sentence they go. Now, if you have a look at these sentences, they all have an adverb of frequency in them, but the adverb of frequency is in a different place. So I'd like you to stop me now and have a look through these sentences and think about where do the adverbs of frequency come. Think about them particularly in relation to the verbs in the sentence. Just switch me off for a minute and have a look. Okay, hopefully you did that. So let's have a look at them together. So this first one, you can see that the main verb in this sentence is try. Now we have another verb, to write, but that's the infinitive verb, so that's a bit different. The main verb, which is conjugated with the subject I, is try. And you can see then that the adverb of frequency comes immediately before the main lexical verb, which is try here. It's a little bit different if the verb in the sentence is be. So I am, he is, they are, she is, she was. This is the verb to be. So if you've got the verb be, they come immediately after that. I'm never late for class. You can't say I never am late for class. You sort of could if you were emphasising it, but generally speaking, we put it after the be. If we've got a verb in two parts with an auxiliary and a main lexical verb, then it goes in the middle. So here we've got have wanted, which is the present perfect tense. We've got have, which is the auxiliary verb here, and wanted, which is the main lexical verb, and it goes between them. Now this is, kind of an extension of the other two rules, isn't it, really? Particularly the first one. It comes before the main lexical verb. It's still coming before that, but it's coming after the auxiliary. And then some adverbs of frequency can come at the beginning or the end of the sentence. Be careful, they can't all do this. So you couldn't say always I ask my tutor for help, or I read the grammar books never. So with always and never they can't do this, but with most of the others they can. So it looks as if they can come almost anywhere, but they can't. There are those particular places. They can't just be put anywhere in the sentence. Something that learners often make the mistake of is to put them after the lexical verb. So they say, I try always to write thorough lesson plans, for example. So let's move on again. So this time we're looking at adverbs of degree. Now, if we have a look at this picture here, adverbs of degree modify or describe adjectives and other adverbs. So up until now we've been looking at adverbs that modify verbs. She dances well, she always dances. But here now we're talking about ones which describe or modify adjectives and other adverbs. So here's an example of this. Here we've got practical here is an adjective. This man is practical. But we could also say that he is so practical. So here, so is an adverb of degree. It modifies the adjective practical. He could also be very practical. He could be amazingly practical. Now here you notice that we've got it ending in ly again. So that shows us, if you like, that it's an adverb too. As we said, most words that end in ly will be adverbs. So see if you can think of any others. Stop me for a minute and see if you can write down one or two. Okay, hopefully you've thought of a few. It could be he's quite practical, he's not practical, he's extremely practical. So anything like that that can go in front of an adjective will be an adverb of degree. Moving on again, another type of adverb are adverbs of time and place. Now these are not always single words, they're often short phrases, so they can also be called adverbial phrases, although I wouldn't use that language to learners. In fact, you probably don't really need to call these adverbs to learners, I don't usually, but you can know that they're called this. So they answer the questions: when did something happen and where did it happen? So there are two examples in this sentence. So years later, as you see, you can see it's a phrase here rather than a single word. She went there. So both of these are adverbial in nature. Oh no, I left my wallet upstairs. Let's hope not with a staircase like that. So upstairs here would be an adverb. So it answers the question where. I said I'd meet her on the bench. So again, we've got a where here. Again, it's not a single word. So be aware that it can be, of a phrase type. So here's a quick quiz. I'm going to give you a sentence and I'd like you to stop me and see how many adverbs you can find in the sentence. Here we go. There's the sentence. Stop me and see if you can find all of the adverbs. Okay, I hope you didn't cheat and you actually did stop. Here they are, I've underlined them. So we can see here slowly twice as an adverb of manner, and very there is an adverb of degree modifying the adverb of manner. From the chair, so that's an adverbial phrase. Never, got an adverb of frequency there. More, an adverb of degree again, and quietly the adverb of manner, which describes the walked. So I've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Hopefully you've got about the same. Right, let's move on then. So verbs. Verbs are clearly a really important part of the language, and we will be looking at verb tenses and that nomenclature because often that's something people are concerned about in videos 4 and 5. But today we're just going to look at the different parts of the verbs. Well, let's start by thinking about whether a verb is transitive or intransitive. Now, if you haven't done much linguistics before, these are probably terms you haven't heard before, but they are important actually, not necessarily to teach learners those actual words, but the concept of them is quite important. Have a look at this. Now, this is something that one of my students once really did say to me. They said, "Oh, you've died." I hasten to add that this isn't a picture of me, but I had coloured my hair that day. Okay, now clearly they were wrong, but can you identify why? Hopefully you've had a think about it. The answer, of course, is that with the D-Y-E, kind of die, it has to have something afterwards. It has to have an object. You can't say you've died. You have to say you've dyed your hair or you've dyed it. Because if you just say you've died, then what I hear is not D-Y-E-D, but D-I-E-D, which is quite different. So here, died with a Y is what's called a transitive verb. It has to have an object. And died, D-I-E-D, is an intransitive verb. It can't have an object. Nothing can come after it. So let's have a look at another couple of examples here. He likes ice cream. This is absolutely fine. He likes, that's not right. And that's what a lot of learners are going to say. It's a really common mistake that what they do is say, "Oh yes, I enjoy," or "I like," or "I hate." You can't say that in English because those verbs are transitive. they have to have an object. They have to have something that comes after them. Whereas other verbs, she's sleeping, that's correct, but you can't say she's sleeping her. That's wrong, because sleeping or sleep is an intransitive verb. It can't have an object after it. Now you can sleep in a bed, for example, but in a bed, as we've just looked at, is an adverbial phrase. It's not an object. So you can't sleep bed. You have to sleep in a bed. So in that case it's different. So we're talking about an object, a noun that comes after the verb as an object of it, direct object of it. And sleep can't have a direct object. You can sleep with someone, but you can't sleep someone. So here's a couple of verbs. See if you can tell me, are they transitive or intransitive? The way to remember the difference between these I find helpful is if you think that in means without, so insensitive means without sensitivity. So intransitive means without an object, transitive means with an object. Be careful, some of these verbs can be both. So how about skip? Okay, I skip. You can't say I skip me, I skip him, so therefore it's intransitive, without an object. Now you can of course skip school. In that case it's a transitive verb, but that's a different verb. It's got a different meaning. So note that sometimes verbs have a transitive meaning and an intransitive meaning that are different. Here's another one, give. Now give, you give something to someone, or you give someone something. So this is transitive. It has to have an object. There is an intransitive meaning for give. For example, I wore my shoes and they gave after a while, meaning got bigger, got stretchier. It's not such a common meaning, clearly. But mostly, the most common use of give is as a transitive verb. Now this obviously can have two objects. It can have a direct and an indirect object. So I gave it to him, or I gave him it. So we've got two objects there, but it's definitely transitive. Here's another one. Now this one, eat, can be transitive or intransitive, and actually the meaning's the same here. So you can eat pasta or you can just eat. I eat every day. So here it can be both and the meaning doesn't change. So you can see that you can have verbs where you've got only one possibility, both possibilities but the meaning changes, or some verbs like eat where both are possible and the meaning doesn't change very much. Enjoy. How about that one? Okay, so that one is transitive. It's like. You can't just enjoy, you have to enjoy something. And pick up. So this is a phrasal verb. It has many meanings, but it's a transitive verb. So you pick up someone, or you pick someone up. So it's splittable. We'll be looking at that in the phrasal verb session in part 2. But you can see it can have, it's always a transitive verb. You can't just pick up. You have to pick up something. And the last one, go. Do you think go is transitive or intransitive? Hopefully you've said that it's intransitive. You can't go someone. You have to just go. You can go somewhere, but as we looked at before, the where, that's adverbial. So I went to the park, but that's adverbial. That's not an object. Okay, so I go, you can't go him. Yeah, you can go with him. Again, that's different. So the other thing to think about is whether verbs are regular or irregular. Regular verbs are ones where the past tense and the past participle end in ed. So for example, the verb walk is regular. She walks, simple present tense. She walked, simple past tense. She has walked, present perfect tense. And the past participle, you can see at the end, is ed. So these are very easy. They've only really got two forms. It's either walk, walks, or walked. So those are the easy ones. The irregular verbs are the ones like swim, which change. So you've got he swims, present tense, he swam, simple past, and he has swum, swim, swam, swum, where you've got these three different forms. So have a look again at the same verbs and tell me, are they regular or irregular? Just stop me for a minute and have a look. So skip is completely regular. It does have a double P, but that's a spelling rule, not about whether it's regular or not, so it's skipped. Give is irregular, give, gave, given. Enjoy is regular, enjoy, enjoyed. Eat is irregular, eat, ate, eaten. Pick up is regular, picked up. And go, of course, irregular, go, went, gone. Now here's a question for you. What percentage of English verbs are irregular, do you think? Now my guess is that you're going to guess quite a high percentage. Just think about it for a minute. Which ones don't end in ed, change? So you might be quite surprised to notice that over 99%, well over 99% of English verbs are regular, end in ed. Now this probably does come as a bit of a surprise to you. The reason, and it probably would come as a big surprise to most learners who think that irregular verbs are very, very common, and they are, but they're not common, they're not numerous. But the problem is that it's a lot of the common verbs are the ones which are irregular. So go, went, come, came, eat, ate, drink, drank, see, saw. All the verbs that we use very, very commonly, the ones that are most common in use, are the ones which are irregular. So it feels as if there's a lot of them in the language, but actually there's about 100 of them altogether. And some of them are a bit like flee and fled, which we don't use very often. They're the very common ones, and that's why they've stayed irregular in the language. So let's move along now. So what are the different verb parts called? We've touched on this a little bit as we've gone along, but let's look at it with some system now. So the base form of the verb, or the infinitive, is the, if you like, the original verb, and that is to do something. So if we take the verb eat as an example, we've got to eat. That's the infinitive. So an example of that would be something like this. She wants to eat. After the verb want, we have the infinitive. Sometimes it's called the infinitive, sometimes it's called the base form, but it's the, if you like, the original bit without any change. So when we look at the infinitive, we're usually looking at the one with to, so to eat. But we can also have what's called the bare infinitive, which means the same thing but without the to. So in some constructions we need the infinitive, but it doesn't have to with it. So for example here, after modals like must, will, might, may, we always have what's called the bare infinitive. She must eat. So it's the same thing but without the to. The next part of the verb is the present simple. So usually this is eat, but with he, she and it, it's eats. So we've got one conjugation there in the present simple. So she eats is the present simple. Now there is a small problem here, because if you look at these two forms, I eat, which is the present simple, and I must eat, where eat is the bare infinitive, they look exactly the same. So you'd be well pushed to ask, well, how do I know that it's the present simple, or how do I know it's the bare infinitive? And the answer is, if you put in a he or a she or an it, you'll notice the change. If it's the present simple, it'll become eats. If it doesn't become eats, then it's not the present simple, then it's the bare infinitive. So that's quite a useful little test. Put he, she or it in and you'll see if it's present simple. So the next part of speech is the simple past tense. It's often just called the past tense, but you can call it the simple past to differentiate it from the past continuous or the past perfect. This is an irregular verb, so here it's ate. She ate yesterday. Notice with regular verbs this would just add ed. So I paint, I painted, for example. We've then got the past participle. The past participle is the third form of the verb and the one that's used in perfect tenses. So she has eaten, she had eaten, she could have eaten. Okay, so the one that's with have, that third one is the past participle. Okay, again with regular verbs you just add ed. So she has painted, it would just be adding ed. The other participle we have is the present participle, and that's the one where you just add ing. Now that's the same, there are no irregular verbs for this, very nice. So we've got she is eating. So the present participle is used with continuous verb tenses. This here is the present continuous, so we'll look more at that later. Could have the past continuous, she was eating, she has been eating. So the present participle is the one with ing. Notice it's not always present tenses, so she was eating is a past tense, it's a past continuous, but that's still called the present participle. Okay. So here we have three other verbs which act as a particular type of verb that we haven't mentioned yet. So there's a has here, there's an is, which is the verb be, she is, he was, we are, and do. And these verbs can be verbs on their own. So if you say she has a dog, that's a full verb. She is tall, that's a full verb. She does her nails, that's a full verb. But in this case, the verb here, the lexical verb, is eat. And so all of those verbs are what are called auxiliary verbs. So you can think of an auxiliary verb as a helping verb. It's a verb which combines with the main verb that has the main meaning, eat in this case, to make it to have a different meaning. So these are auxiliary verbs. So be careful. The auxiliary verbs are has, is, and do, or has, be, and do, I should say. But they can be full verbs on their own, but they are also used as auxiliary verbs. Another type of auxiliary verb are these, and all of these are called modals. Sometimes they're called modal verbs, sometimes they're called modal auxiliaries, sometimes they're called modal auxiliary verbs, but there's a small number of them that, again, they don't exist on their own, they only exist with another verb. So you must swim, you can eat, you shall go to the ball, for example. So here's a quick quiz for you. Can you give an example of each of these? We've just had a look at them. If you're not sure, you can flick the video back and check. Let's see if you can give an example of each one of these things. Okay, so let's choose a different verb for this. Let's have drink. So we've got the present tense, which is I drink, he drinks, so drink, drinks. The past participle, be careful, is drunk here, so drink, drank, drunk. Drank is the past tense, drunk is the past participle. The present participle is drinking. A modal could be can, will, might, may. The infinitive would be to drink. The past tense we've just looked at was drank, and an auxiliary verb would be have, be, or do. So he has drunk, or he is drinking. Those verbs, big auxiliaries. And one more last quick quiz for you. They've got some verb forms here. See if you can identify what they are. Okay, again, stop me and see if you can identify what are those verb forms. Okay, so was here is an auxiliary, making up the verb with was smiling. Smiling here is a present participle. That's the main verb in that clause. Must here is a modal, or modal auxiliary. Have here is the bare infinitive. You can see we've got a he there and it's not has, so it's the bare infinitive. Wanted there is the past participle. Now again, with this verb it's regular. We don't know whether that's the past participle or the simple past tense, do we? Because they both end in ed. But a good test for this is to put an irregular verb into that sentence. So let's say go, for example. He must have gone, not he must have went. Okay, so we know that's the past participle. And finally, to scream, which is the infinitive or the base form. So those are the verb forms, and hope that's been helpful. Do have a go at the quiz, and if you've got any questions, do put them on the forum. Thanks very much. Bye bye.